Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that really pushes the absolute grueling limits of human endurance. We're going to examine the terrifying and frankly heartbreaking story of Neil Moss. It's a tragedy that unfolded deep beneath the earth in Peak Cavern. This was an event that absolutely shocked the nation at the time, and honestly, it remains one of the most haunting underground mysteries we have today. Okay, let's dive into this. Think about this for a second. Most of us have this primal, universal fear of being alone in the dark, right? We imagine shadows, the unknown, that total loss of control. But what happens when the dark stops being just a psychological fear and becomes a fatal, physical reality? I want you to imagine a literal, unyielding prison closing in on you from all sides, where the dark isn't just an absence of light, but a crushing physical weight. Now, for Neil Moss, the dark wasn't a fear at all. Actually, it was his ultimate passion. On March 22, 1959, Neil confidently entered Peak Cavern in the UK. As reports from the BBC detailed at the time, his objective was clear, focused, and absolutely thrilling. He was on a mission to explore a completely uncharted passage. He was a pioneer, literally stepping into parts of the earth where no human had ever set foot. He went into that blackness with so much excitement, fully prepared for the unknown. But tragically, he never walked out. And here's the thing that really gets you. He was just 20, only 20 years old. Now, he was already considered a highly experienced caver for his age, but that number just brings home the visceral reality of this tragedy. Think about it. At 20, you feel totally invincible, don't you? You're full of boundless energy, ambition, this massive thirst for discovery. He was at the very beginning of his life, combining his youth with an immense level of technical skill and bravery. And this brilliantly illustrates what he was up against. He was willingly descending into a feature known as the squeeze. And yeah, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's this notorious, intensely claustrophobic vertical chimney deep inside Peak Cavern. To navigate it, you can't just walk, and you can't even crawl on your hands and knees. You literally have to go in headfirst, sliding downward into the incredibly narrow rock. Neil was relying completely on his training, his muscle memory, and his experience to guide him through this perilous, unbelievably tight space. But then, in a matter of seconds, everything went wrong. As he's descending headfirst, making steady progress, he naturally shifts his weight to navigate the tight space. But that simple, routine, highly trained movement, it disturbed a massive boulder lodged in the rock face above him. Instantly, the boulder shifted and dropped, wedging itself firmly against his chest. In the blink of an eye, a calculated, thrilling exploration turned into a catastrophic race against time. He was penned, no room to move, no room to breathe properly. I really want you to try and imagine the sheer physical weight of that boulder crushing down on his chest. Every single time you exhale, your rib cage contracts, right? And the heavy rock just settles a little bit tighter, severely restricting your ability to draw the next breath. His companions up above realized within mere seconds that this wasn't just a simple stumble or a minor snag. They were dealing with life or death right then and there. Let's move to the timeline here and see how this builds, because it's agonizing. 12 frantic, agonizing hours. That is exactly how long the desperate rescue attempt unfolded. Just try to imagine the sheer stamina and mental fortitude required to stay conscious and fight for your life in a pitch-black, suffocatingly tight space, pinned upside down, for half a day. And it wasn't just the unyielding rock they were fighting. Above ground, a massive rescue effort mobilized. They drew on local cavers, the RAF, and emergency services, as the BBC later detailed. They were pulling out all the stops, literally doing everything humanly possible. But down below, the environment itself was actively working against them. The air in that narrow, enclosed shaft was incredibly thin and oxygen-deprived. And worse, there was a rapid, deadly carbon dioxide buildup happening in that confined space. The rescuers and Neil were battling compounding environmental enemies. The cave was quite literally stealing his vital energy, breath by shallow breath. Now, what's really interesting and honestly horrifying about this part of the story is the psychological terror of the situation. It's almost impossible to fathom, especially for the friends frantically trying to save him. Initially, coherent sentences echoed down the narrow gap. His friends offered words of encouragement, trying to keep his spirit alive and his mind focused. But as the oxygen levels plummeted and the carbon dioxide took over, those responses shifted. Coherent sentences degraded into slurred speech and eventually into fragmented, desperate whimpers. His friends were forced to just listen to him slowly fade away, utterly powerless to lift the stone crushing his chest. And then, the silence begins. After hours of struggle, after the encouraging shouts and the fading whimpers, the responses from the shaft simply stopped, completely. Just an absolute, crushing, devastating silence echoing in the dark. You can only imagine the creeping dread and the pure heartbreak washing over the rescue team in that profound quiet.
So the crucial point here is the horrific logistical realization that followed that silence. Rescue experts on site assessed the stone and estimated that to physically break apart the rock and free him safely, the operation would require heavy, continuous digging. And that digging, it would take days. A luxury Neil Moss simply did not have. The earth had trapped him far beyond their immediate reach, and the clock had tragically run out.
They had to leave him there. The chilling finality of those words is incredibly hard to process. Ultimately, with the heartbreaking consent of his own father, the decision was made. They had to leave his body behind. Neil Moss remains in that very shaft to this day. He became a permanent part of the earth he so deeply loved and fiercely wanted to explore. It is a sobering, tragic legacy that continues to haunt the caving community worldwide. Which leaves us with a really haunting question today. When we push the extreme limits of exploration, when we map the uncharted and dive headfirst into the absolute dark, do we actually conquer the Earth, or do we merely push against it until it finally decides to keep us? It is a stark, lasting reminder of human fragility when faced with the immense, unforgiving power of nature. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.